Hi everyone, I'm back. Not intending to take that long of a break from BookTube. I had so much going on in my personal life, including a really big move across several states. So I am now settled in my parents' house while I wait for my new house to finish being built. So it has been a pretty busy time, as well as just a lot going on with work and other life stuff. So I apologize for not being around for quite a while, but I am back, and I figured I could talk to you all about all the books I was reading while I was on my unplanned mini break from YouTube. It's not that many. I did not get a whole lot of reading done. It's actually been quite sad. I've really missed reading, so I'm hoping to get back in the swing of things so that I can start reading quite a bit again. But I do have some books to share with you all today. Before we start talking about the books, I need to quickly thank Joyvano for so kindly sending me the most adorable bookends that I've ever seen. They're so cute. I luckily took a video of them before I moved to show you all what they look like, but they so kindly sent me these adorable astronaut bookends that when I get into my new house, I am planning on putting in my sci-fi section of my library. They are really great quality. They look fantastic when actually holding your books. I just think that they are so cute, so well made. Joyvano does have a couple of other bookends that I think would be adorable for a children's library or your own personal library. And they were also so kind to send me a discount code for you all to use if you do decide you want your own bookends. So you can use the discount code jessicamae10 for 10% off of your purchase of any of their bookends, which is so great. So thank you so much to Joyvano for sending me your bookends. I absolutely love them, and I can't wait to put them up in my new library. All right, so for this recent reads wrap up, I'm going to go in chronological order. I usually go in the order of my enjoyment, but I don't really remember the books that I've read since my last wrap up. So if I don't have as much to say about these books, I apologize. For some of them, it's been quite a while since I've actually finished them. So let's start with the first one. The first one is 14 by Pierre Kleins. This one was one that I had to read because nothing else was keeping my attention. I had a ton of stress going on at work. I needed something that was going to be fast-paced, easy to read, easy to follow. Didn't take a whole lot of thinking and concentration, if you will. So this is a, how do I classify? I think it's like sci-fi horror. Maybe a little bit of thriller in there. It was a nice blend of genres. And this one for me, I really enjoyed. It was exactly the book I wanted it to be when I picked it up. I figured I would need something maybe quite thrilling, quite edge of your seat, a nice mystery to keep me turning the page, and that's exactly what this book gave. It is about a guy who moves into this new apartment complex, and he quickly realizes that this apartment complex is house to many secrets, a lot of which he is looking to uncover with some of the other residents of this apartment building. And it was just so much fun. The first half of the book, I will say, I thought was a bit stronger than the second half. The twists and reveals, while I wasn't upset or dissatisfied with them, I just found my enjoyment level was much greater before the big reveals were made about what's really going on here. I just loved the mystery building up to that. I thought it did such a good job with the level of intrigue. It had nice horror elements in it that genuinely creeped me out. I just had so much fun with this one. I'll say that the writing style wasn't necessarily the strongest. I don't think that this one was the most polished writing style, if you will, that I've ever read. And the characters themselves, none of them really stood out. I don't remember any of their names actually, thinking back on it, but I do remember what fun I had while reading this. So if you're a plot-driven reader, if you like a good sci-fi thriller, maybe with a little bit of horror thrown in there, I would highly recommend this one. I just needed that page turner, and this is exactly what it gave me. So thank you, 14, for being the book that I needed at the time, and I gave this one 4 stars. The next book I finished was a shorter one, but still one that I really enjoyed, and that was Wintertide by Michael J. Sullivan, which is the 5th book in the Ryaria Revelations series. Now, this has been my year of Michael J. Sullivan, as you all know. If you are not new to my channel, you know that I love Michael J. Sullivan. Nothing is new here. Wintertide is actually my favorite so far of any of the Ryaria Revelation books. This one was a 5-star book for me, and while I will still say like Legends of the First Empire is still by far my favorite, this 5th book really was fantastic. Like, it gave me that same feeling I had when I was reading Legends, which was just loving the whole cast of characters so much, loving the plot, twists and reveals. The whole time I was reading this, was just thinking about how great an adaptation would be for this story because of all of the twists and turns, and the ending of this one was just so amazing, and I was just cheering. I remember finishing this one and just cheering out loud because I was so happy with some of the reveals. So this one was definitely my favorite of the Revelations books so far, and I've just heard nothing but praise for the 6th and final book, and I'm really excited. I just started it actually a couple of days ago, so I'm really hoping to finish that one soon. It is the longest Michael J. Sullivan book I will have read so far, so it might take me a while, but I'm very excited because this 5th one did not disappoint. Now we're getting into August, and I only read 2 books in August. So sad. I was really busy in August. That was my tough mental health month, if you will. Things are better now, but it was a tough month. So only 2 books, but the 2 books that I have were pretty good. So Fury Song by Rosaria Munda. This one was better than pretty good. This was really good. This was my least favorite in the Aurelian Cycle trilogy. I love Fireborn and Flamefall. Both of those were 5 stars. This one, I think I gave 4 stars. I still really enjoyed it. I actually don't think that it could have ended really any other way, but there were just a couple of like areas that we focused on. Like, the first 2 books did such a good job with the world building and the political intrigue, and this 3rd book was much more about exploring the characters' traumas and emotional journeys, and it just had a much more character-focused plot rather than balancing it out nicely with this like political maneuvering. So we really didn't have like that type of political maneuvering that we did in the first 2 books that I loved so much. But this 3rd book was still really good, and I do think that Annie in this book shines. Like, she quickly becomes one of my favorite YA characters. She's just fantastic in this 3rd and final book. I really liked her in the other 2, but for some reason in this 3rd book, she was just elevated for me so much. There were a couple of perspectives I didn't care quite as much about, that every time that point of view popped up, I was like, oh, but can we go back to these other characters? So I think for that reason, it knocked the star rating off, so it got 4 stars instead of 5, but overall, this trilogy is still a 5-star trilogy. So glad I read this. I highly recommend it. I think it's a really mature and nuanced YA fantasy series. Just a little water break. Whew. It's a lot of talking. I'm not used to filming. So definitely check it out if you have been eyeing it. The next book I read was Upgrade by Blake Crouch, and this was one of my most anticipated books of the entire year. And I will say this is probably going to make my most disappointing books this year, only because I had such high expectations for this one. I thought that this sounded like it could potentially be my favorite Blake Crouch from the concept. It has to do with gene editing and like modifying DNA. And there were such cool concepts in this book and such interesting philosophical questions that it posed. And it really made you think, like, is this a good or is this a bad thing? This technology and this ability that humans have. I loved those types of themes and conversations this book could have. The problem was the actual plot of this one I felt was the weakest of any Blake Crouch book. It felt very, very predictable. Like, I was never surprised by anything. There was never any real big twists or turns, and that was something that was such a staple for me in Blake Crouch's other books that I've read. They're usually so twisty and have such big mind-bending moments, and this one just really didn't have that same shock factor or same twist, really keeping it moving forward. So it felt very predictable, and the character wasn't all that likable, and I just wasn't a huge fan. I do like the epilogue. The epilogue for me was the strongest part of the book, but overall I just found myself, as we were continuing on with this character story, caring less and less about what was happening. And by the end I was like kind of skimming a little bit because I was just not that invested. So I was a little bummed because I was really expecting to love this one, and this one was definitely more disappointing. I wasn't mad at it. It didn't like do anything wrong. It just wasn't what I was expecting from it. Now we're getting into September, and first book I finished in September was A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This was so kindly sent to me for review by Orbit, so thank you so much, Orbit. Dowry of Blood is a really, really fascinating story that is told from the perspective of one of Dracula's wives. And it is so well written, and I loved the way it was told so much. And I just found it so fascinating. And it's really a story that explores toxic relationships and emotional abuse in such a deep and nuanced way. I thought it was really well done. If you're going into this book looking for a vampire story, I don't know that this will necessarily deliver on that. I thought there was just enough of the exploration of vampires, if you will, and what's like being a vampire. But the story much more focused on the relationship dynamics between Dracula and Dracula's partners. And that, for me, was the strongest part of the book. It was pretty short. I think it was about 200 pages. And it definitely, like, I remember quite a bit of this book, and there were some moments that were very steamy. This was definitely one that at times I was like, wow, this is getting a lot steamier than I thought it was going to. So it's very adult, very mature, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was just really well written. I really liked the voice of Dracula's wife, and he's never named in the book, but you always just know who they're referring to. And I just thought that that was such a clever choice. So I really liked this book. I'm very glad I read it. It's a perfect one to read around spooky season, around Halloween. So if you're looking for that type of book, maybe don't go in thinking you're gonna get all the vampires, but if you're looking for just a really well-written story that examines a pretty complex relationship, check out A Dowry of Blood. I gave it 4 stars. All right, 2 more. I also read Wondersmith by Jessica Townsend. So this one I really liked. First half of this book, I wasn't totally hooked or invested, but by the second half of the book, I had so much fun. I had a lot more fun in the second half of the book, and I really liked some of the relationships we were finally focusing on in the second half of the book. The whole plot of the second book, I wasn't convinced by it until the end when some things were explained. I was like, okay, I guess I can buy it now. There were just some choices that other characters were making around Morrigan and for Morrigan and about Morrigan that just didn't make any sense to me. And I still wasn't totally convinced by the explanations, but I was like, all right, I'll give you a pass on that. So I think overall, if I was the target audience for this series, I would probably give the book a 4 stars, which is why I gave it a 4 stars. But I was definitely expecting more from this series, given how popular and how hyped it is in the book community. So many people love, love, love this series. And right now, I'm really enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun with it, but it's not quite to that level of hype that I was expecting it to be. And then we have the last book that I just finished, and oh my goodness, this poor book I have been reading for 2 months. It is The Coward by Stephen Aryan, and me taking 2 months to finish this book had nothing to do with the quality of this book. It had everything to do with all of the other stuff going on in my life that was making it impossible for me to focus on this book. But The Coward by Stephen Aryan is the story of a man who at one time in his life when he was much younger was a part of this crew that traveled up to the far north to defeat this evil ice villain monster. And he was the only one of that crew that survived this journey and made it back home. So he's kind of been labeled as this legendary hero because he was the one who slayed this ice monster. And ever since then, he's been living in peace, but something happens where the king needs him to go do this journey again and find out what is making trouble up in the north again. He has no intentions of going. He is like, I did my part and I want to live in peace. But things unfurl and the story goes from there. I really liked the concept of this one. I really liked the main character of Kel, and I really liked the writing style. Those 3 things really were the strongest parts of the story for me. There were a couple of different perspectives, one of which is a reverend mother who is kind of this religious leader, and that was also one of my favorite parts of the book was whenever we were in her perspective, because I found it so fascinating, her as a character. I would love more exploration of her as a character in the sequel. But I will say that for me, this wasn't an all-time favorite, only because I think of something very subjective, which is quest stories are not my favorite. And by the halfway point in this book, we go into full-on quest mode. And for me, if that is not balanced with other storylines of other characters going on that are outside of that quest, I find myself starting to lose interest. Quest stories are a little more predictable. So I will say the middle chunk of this book was, for me, kind of the weakest part, but that's only because of my subjective taste that I don't love quest stories. So if you love a good quest, like a classic feeling fantasy quest, this is really going to be a good book for you. I will say the ending, I really, really enjoyed. I like how this book ended at the very, very end. I thought it was quite intriguing, and I definitely want to pick up the sequel. And then I really liked how this book began, and the writing style was excellent. Definitely interested in checking out more of this author's works. I gave it 4 stars because I really did have a good time with it. There were a lot of things I really liked about this book, but it's not a new favorite. So those are all of the books that I've read in the past couple of months while I have been absent from BookTube. Let me know what your favorite book has been in the past couple months that you've read. I would love to make a list of some of your recent favorites. So let me know in the comments down below. And thank you all so much for keeping with me, even if I'm a little more absent at the latter half of this year. I apologize. It's just been pretty hectic. So I'm hoping soon enough I will get back in the swing of things and can start making some videos consistently again. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye.